right, thank you all for coming out. It's a great honor to be here today to share our journey navigating life as an artist, and as well as why us three have came together to form the Ceramic Sculpture Culture Collective. So we're going to start out, we're going to kind of introduce ourselves a little bit. That way you kind of have a little understanding of where we come from and kind of what has led us to kind of form this group. So I graduated from Buffalo State College in 2009. My name's Travis Winters first. I graduated from Edinboro University in 2013. Since graduating grad school, I've gone on to do residencies. Kind of right out of grad school, I went to Odyssey Clayworks. While I was there, I did a short-term residency at Red Lodge Clay Center and Watershed Center for the Ceramic Arts. And from there, I moved on and went to Baltimore Clayworks for 2 years as a fellowship and a resident artist there. And I have recently taken a job at Touchstone Center for Crafts as the program manager. And now I'm going to introduce Kevin Rohde.
Hi guys, it's an honor to be here. I received an Associate's of Fine Art and a Bachelor of Art from Keystone College in 2007. My MFA from Edinboro University in 2012. Following that, I moved to Northern Clay Center in Minneapolis, where I received a Fogelberg Fellowship from 2012 to 13, and a Lormina Salter Fellowship at Baltimore Clayworks from 2013 to 14. In 2016, I received a Nyberg grant to travel to Tainan National University of the Arts in Taiwan. And I now reside in Baltimore, Maryland, where I teach at Towson University and George Washington University in Washington, D.C.
Hey, I'm Taylor Robinault. My background is I got a BFA from Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. I did a postbac at University of South Florida in Tampa for 2 years. And then I went to UGA in Athens, Georgia. And from there, I became a technician at a local college in Sarasota called State College of Florida. And then I taught there for a couple of years. And then I moved to Auburn, Alabama, and I was an adjunct there for a year and a half. And then I became a resident at Odyssey Claywork, which was awesome. And now I'm teaching at Ringling College of Art and Design in Sarasota, Florida. And so today we're going to kind of talk about just what we've been doing after school. We're going to start off kind of with residencies and talk about teaching in galleries and then kind of end on our collective. So do you want to go first, Kevin? How was your residencies?
Sure. Well, can you guys hear me okay if I'm sitting back away from the mic this far? You good in the back? Good?
No, I don't think
No?
we can hear you.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right. Well, the biggest thing for me was, when I went to grad school, I thought that I wanted to teach. That's why a lot of people go to grad school. I wanted to get that MFA so I could begin teaching. But the impact that grad school, that time spent working in the studio, being able to just focus 100% for 3 years on my work, really got me passionate about my work and that drive and focus to keep it going. So once I finished graduate school, I really didn't have any interest in jumping right into a teaching position. I really wanted to keep building on that body of work, develop the work, and get out into the world of ceramics. Grad school can be very isolating in some ways. And Edinboro University is one of those schools it's in the middle of nowhere, right? And that was one of the draws for me, was to be able to just focus. But I really wanted to get out and network with people and develop work. So that was the big push to do a residency immediately out of grad school. And it's kind of a challenging thing, Grad school is one of those times also when you're so connected to things, and then there's that transition because it's a terminal degree, right? So then it's like, well, now what? I can't go back to school. Do I get a job? How do I continue to make art? It's scary, right? And so you kind of, at least from my experience, you apply to everything you can. It's like you have your thesis semester and you're just shooting for everything. And so I applied to, I think, 14 different residencies and just shot them out there, and waited, and there's that waiting period that can be a little nerve-wracking.
It's definitely nerve-wracking.
Yeah. So for me, and then, I was fortunate enough to have some options. So I was able to weigh my options, and that's when I moved to, I accepted the Fogelberg Fellowship at Northern Clay Center and went out there, which was a really amazing experience. And if, do you guys have input on your
Yeah.
decisions?
Yeah, so kind of when I got out of grad school, I feel like I've had maybe my story's a little different than Kevin's. I feel like in grad school, I hate my grad school work now that I think about it. And kind of coming from that atmosphere, like I had never made work outside of school, and it was like terrifying to think about moving on to kind of the next step. And I feel like my last semester in grad school, I kind of started to figure out what I wanted to do with my work. Which if I moved on and like went from there to teaching and getting a job, my work would have decreased, and I was like constantly hitting the point where I was like really excited to be making work, and kind of I wanted to further develop what I was doing. And I think I didn't really find my voice until kind of the residency experience and kind of having that like community of people, which, I mean, yeah, you leave grad school as a student, you're probably broke, number one. And the thought of setting up a home studio and like getting the equipment is like impossible. But then like having the residency, you have the community, you have the people, you have the support. It's kind of like school, but not really. You know, you don't have deadlines, which for me was probably the biggest thing. It's like in grad school, I felt there's so much pressure to kind of go through and really make work as fast as I possibly could for deadlines. And then when I kind of got to the residencies, I slowed my work down, which kind of changed everything with kind of what I've done. And then kind of bouncing from different residencies, which has been like a really unique experience. I feel like coming out of grad school, the only thing I wanted to do was the long-term residencies, because it just, you know, you got the more stable comfort of that. But then kind of jumping in and doing some short-term things, which has really been eye-opening with me. The big thing with residencies is like the long-term ones, unless you're one of the lucky few that doesn't have to have a job when you're there, you're hustling hard to kind of make the ends meet on top of making work, which is really hard. But the short-term ones, generally, like going somewhere, you have that time to focus, and it's in like 2 weeks you get as much done as you do in like 2 months, because you don't have life following you around, which has been huge. Like, and I love those now, because it's kind of what I prefer to do just because of that aspect.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. The short-term ones are great because it's kind of like art camp. You go and all you focus on is art, and you're surrounded by people who are just as thrilled and just as passionate. And you stay up super late, and you get up super early. It's kind of like here, you know, like we are going hard here. Like everybody's ready to go for NCCA. It's the same thing at the short-term residencies. I've done a few. I've done some at Watershed, and I've done some scholarship stuff for Penland, and I came to residencies a little different than they did. I immediately got a job after school because I just was like, this is what I need to do. And I saw the benefits of people going to residencies after school because they literally kept that momentum of making work. And so if I could do it again, I would have gone to residencies after grad school because you have so much thought and so much process put into what you're making at school that it just transfers into that residency situation. So I've been teaching for a while, and I decided that I wanted to go to a residency for a long term so that I could focus on work more. And so I decided I left Auburn to go to Odyssey in Asheville. I had done a short-term residency during the previous summer and kind of fell in love with the people, fell in love with the atmosphere, fell in love with everything that they had to offer. And so I kind of call it like a lateral move. Like I was working and then I went to Odyssey and had more exposure, more opportunities to show, but it was a hustle. You know, you work a lot because you're working during the day and then you're coming in at night, staying really late, and then getting up early and going back to work. So that's kind of been my experience, and I feel that we all benefited greatly from those experiences, and encourage all of you guys to do the same. But kind of, you know, we've been talking a little bit about the struggle. That is probably one of the biggest struggles, I think, at a residency is work, trying to figure out how to work and do the residency at the same time.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that's the biggest difference, right? Because a long-term residency, you have to commit generally to changing your job. If, you know, I mean, if you're going to go to a year-long, like generally, you know, a year-long residency would be a long-term. And so you're uprooting and, you know, you're moving probably across the country, maybe out of the country. And so, you know, there's a huge difference there because you're changing, you know, you're looking for an apartment, trying to find a job, figure out how you're going to support yourself. And some of the challenges there too are that some residencies, you know, a lot of depending on the place, have term limits. So you're there for a year, but there's not always the opportunity to stay. And you know, I think a lot of people have gone through that cycle of residency hopping, where you do this residency. Like my experience, I did residency at Northern Clay Center. It was a year-long fellowship, and you have the opportunity for an exhibition. I mean, exhibitions
Yeah,
are a big part of
that's
that
a
too.
big-
So you're working towards a goal versus a short-term residency being more of a, you know, developing,
Yeah.
just
Making work
experimenting,
and
the
hanging out.
opportunity for experimentation. But with the long term, you know, it's a life-changing move. And then you're, you know, on to the next, and then, you know, it can get kind of daunting, you know, moving from city to city. And then there's also different benefits from different places. I was fortunate at my first residency to be able to. Northern Clay Center has a really great exhibitions aspect, you know, component, and I was able to volunteer working with Jamie Lang and Mike Arnold, and they have the capacity to have really large work, which was a big thing for me because I was making fairly large figurative sculpture, and so being able to have the experience of moving large work, like they had some of those June Kaneko dangos in an exhibition, and we're like moving these things, you know, and just figuring out ways of moving a giant sculpture. It was really beneficial, and even just packing work. You know, there's some of those things where I didn't have any experience packing work. You know, I didn't know, like, okay, start with tissue paper and then, you know, move into newsprint, and then, you know, then you start bubble wrapping, and, you know, all of those simple things that I think at times I often take for granted, but I didn't know that until then. So depending on where you are, there's those little things that you can take advantage of at different places, and some of that's also part of that decision-making process. You know, I think if you're looking to do a residency, it's really important to do your background research and get a sense of what opportunities there are at that location, and what else you can do. Also, like with community arts programs too. I mean,
Yeah.
there's Baltimore Clayworks.
Yeah.
It's a huge.
For me, kind of the Baltimore Clayworks was kind of like a huge transformative experience for me, mainly because of the opportunities I got to teach. Me and him both going to Edinburgh, a lot of schools, you get kind of that background in education. You have the opportunity to teach classes, but coming from not doing it, I had never really had the experience of teaching. I taught a little bit at Odyssey, but moving to Baltimore, there was so much opportunity within the city to teach. I was teaching everything from community classes. I ended up teaching at a senior center home, which kind of led me. I fell into like teaching college classes, and from there, even I was teaching high school, which was to me the biggest kind of benefit from that. Is kind of getting that experience. I found my love for teaching through residencies. And without that, I don't think I ever would have really had that opportunity. And I mean, all of that has kind of led me into my current position, is kind of trying to do and provide those opportunities for other people. That way they can kind of have that experience of kind of doing things that change your life forever. You know, it's quite a wonderful experience. And kind of with that, I kind of want to talk a little bit more kind of about teaching and kind of what that entails. I know kind of for me, coming from grad school, it was again, not having the teaching experience, looking at it from the outside. I think a lot of people go to grad school with expectations to teach, kind of depending on what you want to do. And I think almost all of us here probably had that kind of same mentality going into it. So kind of with that, I'm going to kind of lead right into Taylor and let her kind of talk about her experience, since she went straight from grad school into a teaching position.
Teaching. Yeah, in grad school, I actually had the opportunity to teach. I got a scholarship to UGA, and part of the system there was that you would teach intro classes. So I got some experience in grad school, which was really beneficial, and then that was easy for me to transition out of school and to teach. Most of us have taught every gamut of teaching. I've taught little kids, I've taught older people, I've taught high school. You take a teaching job because it's a way to stay involved, and it's good money, and you love. Nothing is more rewarding than teaching people what you know and what you love. So yeah, I taught at a community college in Sarasota, and then at Auburn, and then I started teaching at Ringling, and there's different facets of teaching. And so the other one that I've been pursuing a lot lately is teaching workshops. And those are great because your students are there to learn. Sometimes in school, you have students that really want to be there, and then you have students that don't. And so something's really wonderful about a workshop situation because everybody wants to be there. And so that's kind of my teaching scope. And I've stepped back a little bit from teaching because I do some real estate stuff, and that helps me pay my bills. But Kevin, out of the three of us, does the most teaching. And would you like to share some of that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and I think that is one thing that often might get missed. You know, when you think of a career in the arts,
Yeah.
so many people have so many other ways of supplementing income. You know, most of us can't survive on selling artwork.
Yeah.
You know, so things
Definitely
like that. I
sculpture.
mean, you know, I have been supporting myself teaching for the past few years, and I don't know, teaching. You know, my first experiences in teaching were teaching adult classes. It was tricky. You know, Travis spoke a little bit to, you know, we both went to Edinburgh for our MFAs, and it was a little bit unique in that aspect because we didn't have teaching assistantships. It also gave us the opportunity to really develop our work because we were working as studio techs. But without that experience of teaching in a college, it was a little tricky. So I taught with the Erie Art Museum for my first adult figurative class, and then and to the benefit of residencies, there's usually teaching opportunities. So through the different residency programs at Northern Clay Center and Baltimore Clay Works, I taught adult education. And so my first teaching job was at George Washington University teaching wheel throwing. And it was like just getting thrown into the pool and learning to swim, you know. It was really intense and intimidating because, you know, when you have that teaching assistantship in grad school, it's kind of like I don't want to.
Oh no, it's like training wheels.
A little
I got
bit
a lot of stuff figured out in grad school.
Yeah, and you have that. You know, you
Yeah.
have professors that you can kind of bounce ideas off of and say, you know, they can look over your syllabus
Yeah.
and say like, hey, how does this look? You know, what do you think of this? How did you think? You know, you could gauge student reactions, and so it was one of those things. And it was a new city to me. You know, I had
Yeah.
never spent any significant amount of time in DC. And so it was a really intense learning experience, but it also really excited me because once I got into that situation and after that first initial, you know, feeling of that wave of terror that came off, I realized how much I loved that connection. And especially, I think for me, like teaching a wheel, I really love teaching things that aren't necessarily exactly what you do. I mean, I teach human figure at Towson University, which is what I do. I'm a figure sculptor, but I love teaching things like wheel throwing, and it was such a great class, especially as a first class, because there's something about being able to watch the progress and steps of students as they, you know, they're really starting to get something, and I mean that really was huge.
Yeah, I think teaching, I mean, for me, like, I've done a little bit of college teaching. I've done a lot of kids teaching, which is, honestly, like, I've kind of taught every age from age 5 up to age 80, which it's amazing kind of to see that different. Teaching is so wonderful because, like, young kids, I feel like a lot of people avoid teaching the young kids, but it's, like, so refreshing to see kids come into something new. I mean, every kid loves ceramics.
Yeah, they love
I feel like they just blend right in. And then kind of jumping up, like, you start to teach adults, and I feel like adults are a little more uptight when it comes to teaching them. They don't want to ruin things, as where kids just mash it together. And it's taught me so much teaching. I feel like it's almost like guilty. Every time I teach, I feel like I get more out of the class than most of the students do. I mean, if you've worked with kids, they literally just mash stuff together, comes out of the kiln, no crack. You're like, how does that work? And it's made me lighten up so much about my own work. There's like something so refreshing about that, which I love. I mean, even college classes, I feel like kids are like adults, they get a little more intimidated by it. There's like the freshness of it, but it all kind of teaches you new things. And if you ever have the chance, like, teach all of it because it's too good not to.
I think to that point too, there's something very different about an or an adult education class versus, say, something, you know, a classes in academia, because of the way people are handling that class, right? Adult education, people are there because they really just want to make something. They come from varying skill levels. and it's, the community environment is very different than academia. I guess probably the biggest thing is because, in academia, you're getting graded.
Yeah.
And, you have very strict regimented project outlines versus some, in community classes, a lot of times somebody might be taking, say, I don't know, well, in my case, a figure class, but they're making, like dolphins on pots because that's what they want to do. And you're not going to say no, right? You want to encourage that and find ways to, help use the class to help them progress their work, right? And then the rigidity of academia as well, like certain things the other levels too, like teaching workshops, right? Workshops are a completely different element because it's a short-term time span, but you're working very intensely together. So that type of group environment is much different as well. And, having that, for me, workshops are really refreshing because they can, and because I'm teaching, spring and fall, summertime is the time to do it. So you get to travel to a place and it just, that's where I get my juice. You get charged up from just working with a group of people who really just all they want to do is work in the studio all day long. And that is one of those things where I don't know, there's nothing like it. And you learn so much from different people. One of my favorite things about that aspect is the people you meet, right? And community classes are similar as well, but people who come from all sorts of different backgrounds. A lot of times someone has worked an entire career in some exotic field and decides, and then they fall into clay. And so you meet people with such diverse backgrounds and you learn their stories, you're working together all day, so they share a lot of stories. And, when you get into that work mode and you kind of forget that you're talking and then your personality just bubbles out, and it always happens.
Yeah. I like to do icebreakers. I'm like, tell me the weirdest story that happened to you. Let's just all put it on the table.
Yeah.
Let's loosen up a little bit.
Yeah.
I had two things kind of coming off of what you guys were saying for teaching. One with Travis is when you teach, you kind of lighten up a little bit because you see people do stuff that you're like, oh, you shouldn't do that. That's going to crack. That's going to be intense. I don't know if that's going to work. And then they do it and there's nothing wrong with it. And you're like, oh, okay. For me, I started an account called Ceramic Casualties, which I don't know if you guys have seen. That was strictly out of kids doing stuff, me being like, this is going to happen to you. And they're like, oh, no, I'm going to put it in anyways. And I'm like, all right. And then I created this account so I could show everybody that every single person in this field, no matter how long you're in it, will have issues with clay. It's just part of the property, right? And I love it. I love that started in an academic setting with one of my students named Kanie. She did something, and I was like, we're going to have to document this. This is today, we're starting this account to make everybody know that, things happen in clay. And then the other thing that I was thinking is workshops are just awesome because it's like camp because everybody there loves it, and I just love the storytelling that happens. And people come from these diverse backgrounds, and I call it the ceramic bug when you get bit and you're just like, dude, tell me everything. I want to know this. I want to know that. Do you know anything about this firing or decals? You're just like, yeah, I know all of it. Let's talk. It gets exciting.
Yeah, I think everyone in this room is here for a ceramics conference.
Yeah.
I think we can all relate to the first time you touch clay and you're like,
You're like, hallelujah.
I found it. This is the greatest thing ever. And as a teacher, you have that opportunity. It's great to come here. I see all of my professors. I got into clay in college because I took a random class. I was like, this is the greatest. Switched majors, haven't looked back since. Obviously, 15 years later, I'm still here. And, the teaching gives you that opportunity. It's incredibly rewarding. You know? And to be able to give back to people kind of what this has given all of us. I would say everyone here is one big community of people, and it doesn't get better than kind of having that. Introducing that to people is so wonderful.
Yeah, and so kind of one way to make money is teaching. Another way to make money is to try to sell your work. And so we're going to kind of transition into talking about galleries. And I'm going to go first because I probably, out of the three of us, I have a couple galleries that represent me. And the way that I did it is I kind of switched my work to make it a little bit more marketable. I have a line of work that is completely sculpture, and then I have kind of a line of work that's more functional, or I kind of have been making these sculptural teapots that have been doing well. And so with that experience, I feel like it was a great way for me to learn how to make more money doing what I love. And Odyssey Clayworks did a really good job of helping me get more comfortable with that. In a residency setting, there was a lot of people in that setting that had gallery experience and gave me like little nudges, being like, yeah, totally do it. Like, don't worry. Like, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. And so kind of to get a gallery, I feel like a lot of people are super intimidated by that, right? Like the idea of like having your work, are you ready? And my overall thing to y'all is just do it. Like, just put your stuff out there and see what happens. And I've applied to so many galleries, and now I have 4. You know, like, it happened. It took me some time, but I made a body of work, and I documented it all, and I put a CV together and all that stuff. And then I approached a gallery just being like, your space is great. I see the work here. I think my work could work well in this setting. And I've had some people be like, nope, not interested at all, thank you very much. And then I've had some people that are like, maybe, let's keep talking. And then I have some galleries that are like, yeah, I think I could actually do this. And so I'm probably the one that's got the most representation. These two have in and out, and so I think they're gonna share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, Taylor's great. Me and Kevin are kind of flunkies when it comes to like approaching galleries. I'm one of the nervous people that it intimidates me to death to approach galleries. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, that's one thing. Like, I do a lot of juried shows, and it's just like, what do you do? I mean, my time at Odyssey informed my work a ton.
Yeah.
I also kind of started making things to sell as a like sculptor. It's a lot. I think the world's a little different than navigating being a potter. Pots are pretty accessible. Like, you can come. People can afford a cup for the most part, but when it comes to selling the larger sculptural pieces, it's really hard to do, and it doesn't happen very often. So you kind of have to figure out a way to make ends meet. And for me, like, I got into living in North Carolina, face jugs, kind of like I felt obligated to make them, which I started making this work, more sellable stuff, in a sense to make money. Like, it was nothing but money at the time, which actually has kind of leaked into my work. Like, I was making nothing but animal pieces and kind of making these weird face jug things, kind of one day like transformed my work to be a figure. I was like, oh, what if I do an actual figure rather than a pot with a face on it, which was great. And I feel like that work informed the work I do sculpturally even, which is great. But I would love to have somewhere to get rid of it so it doesn't sit in my studio and collect dust. So, I mean, that's kind of my experience with it. It's hard. I don't know.
Yeah, Kevin, what's your experience with galleries?
Well, I think a decision I made, let me get that closer. Decision I made early on in my, really, I guess it was probably in grad school when I was developing kind of the body of work that I wanted to continue. And my work is fairly linear in nature. You know, I kind of, this piece leads to the next. And I made the decision early on that I wanted to make work for exhibition. You know, I never really considered my work supporting me. And my interest was really completely focused on just developing the work and narrative within it and making it stronger. And so I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum because I've never cared to conform my work to a sellable format. And so that makes galleries, sales galleries, a little tricky, right? Because my work is not very sellable. I put a lot of time into the work that I make, and it's pretty expensive, right? But I'm not really worried about it because that's not as important to me. So I've had I've worked galleries like at clay centers. I've had work in clay shops, sales gallery, but it's always very tricky because price points, right? And so, I don't know. I mean, I would say I try to make small work, but I don't know. I don't make small work. There's something, it's just, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'm going to do it this year. Maybe I'll do, I'll do this short-term residency and I'll experiment with it. I'm going to make, I'll make pieces, I'll limit myself to 14 inches. And then, I get into it and I'm just like, man, I don't want to make those fingers that small. I need fingernails on these fingers. And then it's like, okay, well, I'll leave that piece, it's like leather hard, starting to get dry. And I'm just like, nah, I'm going to make something big. And so for me, that's really it. And I think that's a decision that you have to make because, everybody has different lines there. You know, what lines are you willing to cross to support yourself? I mean, there's also that challenge of like, what would you rather be doing with your time? You know, I enjoy teaching, so that's how I support myself. But I miss those long days in the studio, you know. And what is the sacrifice? Do you spend, you know, 4 hours a day in the studio making something that you can sell, but it's not what you're really passionate about? Or, you know, do you spend all your time? Because that's one of those things that I think that's my fear of that like, oh man, I can crank these things out and sell them, but then it takes over your life. And then that work that you're so passionate about gets put on the back burner, and you end up just making things to sell. And I think galleries can influence that as well, because if you're moving one type of
Yeah.
work, then all
They
of a
want
sudden
more.
that's the work that you make, and you get labeled, kind of typecast as that's what you make, and then that room to grow and branch out is lost. And I just always want to continue to challenge to push my work somewhere else, you know, and change it up. So for me, that's never really been an option. And yeah, I guess that's
Yeah.
my experience.
I bounce back and forth between that all the time.
I do too.
It's like right now I'm at a point where I finally have a job that actually I'm not stressed about money. I feel like it always comes down to money, which is terrible. But like living in North Carolina, when I was there, it was, I need to make rent. So
Yeah.
I'm going to make 20 cups, and then you really bounce back and forth. But like me being mean, like my mode now is I'm on Kevin's side of the fence, which who knows? I mean, maybe in a month I'll be back over here, but like I want to make small work, you know, it's,
Like a day.
Yeah, I
Tomorrow,
have no
you're
idea
going to
what
make
it-
small work. Yeah.
but I think it's all, I mean, I think there's a right or wrong way to do it. It really is like making that conscious
Yeah.
decision as to what you want to do. Do you want to be the person that has museum shows, like, or do you want to be,
In
oh
50
yeah,
galleries.
do you want to sit at home all day in your studio making work and making a living being an artist, or do you want to, like, I mean, Kevin's bouncing back and forth to make a living because of his decision to make that work, which is exhausting, I'm sure, right? I mean,
yeah, like commuting for teaching, to schools.
but
yeah.
then you have the people that can spend their life in their studio, but they have to kind of make those sacrifices to be able to do that. Definitely as a sculptor, I think it's a really weird realm to kind of walk and kind of figure out how you navigate it, which is, I mean, if we had the answers, we would love to give them to you. I don't think we have answers as to how to do this. I mean, that's kind of the most wonderful and most terrifying thing about being an artist, is trying to figure out how to do it. Like, I've just got my first full-time job ever, which is wonderful. I love it. But like, yeah, those studio days, like I was a studio rat. I lived in the studio up till 6 months ago. And now I sit on a computer most days, and then I go home, I work for an hour or two in my studio. It's making that sacrifice, but that's also bringing me to the point of being able to make the work that I'm really passionate about making, rather than making the time to make that work, to be able to make my ends meet and actually eat food at the end of the day. So,
Really quick, we were having a conversation last night, and Taylor, you brought up, I would just wonder if you could speak to it a little bit.
About
the
what?
real estate stuff and
Oh, sure.
how much more difficult, like you said something about the, like, because there's, clients are always there.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
if you have
Yeah.
a space, you know
Yeah.
that within a month it's going to get filled.
Yeah, so kind of what I do to make money is I'll buy homes that are beat up a little bit, and then I'll renovate them myself, and then I lease them out to people for a year. And the rent covers the mortgage on the house. And one of the things that's really nice about the business I'm in is that everybody needs a place to live. So there's a market for it. I know that I can have someone move out of a house, and within a month I could probably get it rented out again. And usually for $50 more. Like, I know that there's always like a steady increase, and there's just like a whole business side to that I understand, and it's steady. Art is not like that. You can be killing it one year and then like just blank the next year, or just things happen in your life and it's like hard to get stuff done, and
Yep.
so it's
The ebbs and flows.
Yeah,
I mean,
and you
they're
have to-
extreme. It's peaks and valleys.
yeah,
You know.
and you really have to get comfortable with the uncertainty of art. And when I first got into art, I was not comfortable with it at all. Like I was awkward about it all day long because I was like, oh man, I need to have this plan. It needs to go this way. It needs to be X, Y, and Z, and like boom, 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 boom. And it always, without fail, would never do what I wanted it to do. And so now I'm like, hey, I'm here to stay, but like this is always gonna have this like up and down roller coaster kind of setting. And the reason why we were kind of talking about galleries is we came together as a collective because we wanted to have a little bit more control in our shows. Because trying to get a place to represent us is hard and difficult, we decided that it would be great if we got a group of really good artists together and start promoting space and time and gallery stuff for that. And so we kind of wanted to end on the note about coming together as a collective. The strengths of it is really powerful. And so I think we're just going to kind of go down the line and talk about it. So I feel, Travis, what do you got to say about our collective?
The collective has been amazing. It's one of those things, actually, it started in Kansas City at NCECA during lunch.
Yeah.
Is how it started.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I had known Taylor through
Odyssey, we met at Odyssey.
I'd known Kevin through grad school, and me and Taylor had kind of like mentioned things at one point, like, I mean, you have all these
Wouldn't
great
it be
groups. You have
cool?
like Objective Clay. You have all these like pottery groups doing these really good things. And I remember specifically the thing that hit me at that point in time, going to the student show and just being like, wow.
Yeah.
Like the amount of amazing figurative artwork that was happening, it was unreal. And kind of getting that thing flowing in my head is like, how do we do something about it? Like, it's hard. I mean, I feel like sculptures probably fall off the face of the earth so quick because the living thing is so hard to do. So we talked about like forming this group. Kind of. It didn't even really start as a group. It started as an Instagram page. We're like, let's start an Instagram page so we can like promote this work that we feel so passionate about. Which then kind of led down the road to being like, what if we do this as a group and invite other artists to kind of be a part of this and start having shows together? So we invited us 3 plus 7 other artists, really not having a clue as to what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's always developing. It's still like the original plan was like, let's just let's show together. Now that we've shown together kind of around, it's getting to the point where like, how many times can we show together? You know, like where does this go from there? And where do we keep moving forward? Which is kind of where we're at right now, and really trying to figure out how to move this thing forward. For the longest time, it was me, Kevin, and Taylor meeting every single week. Dedication, like an hour and a half meetings. It's not bad. I mean, we're like best friends because of it, you know. And
we spend like the first 10 minutes just talking about nothing that's important.
I
Like
think
we
it's
just
one of
gab.
the most beneficial aspects.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's important, right? Because I don't think we would still be together as a group if we didn't have that regiment of like, we need to meet, we need to cover this, we need to do this, we need to apply for this. You know, it's been a huge learning experience.
Yeah.
But those meetings, and I mean, for me, that's why I wanted to be a part of this collective, was because it's that opportunity to discuss things with other artists. I feel like we get so isolated in our studios. And when you have that opportunity to just chat about it, you know,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's not like, well, hey, how are you doing this? But things like Taylor has experience in one area,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
one person might have a lot of graphic design experience, so
Yeah.
they can work a website. Another person might be really good at writing, or at least spell checking.
Not me. I'm the worst speller on the face of the planet, and they give me so much guff about it.
Yuppie.
Yeah, so the other day I've been spelling yup for the last 2 decades with an E at the end of it, and they decided to point out that it's Y-U-P, no E.
yes, I'm gonna kind of jump back. Like the meeting started out us 3.
Yeah.
Like we're like best friends because of this. Like we knew each other somewhat. Like I've known me and Kevin have been like really good friends from grad school, but now we're like really great friends. And now we're to the point like trying to move this collective forward. We're bringing all 7 members into these meetings,
Which is interesting.
Difficult.
Yeah.
Because we're all over the country.
Yeah,
so
we're
we've got
nationwide.
members all over the country, and and we're all artists, so we're all over the place. We haven't figured it out. We're trying to figure out how to kind of manage this thing, and I imagine kind of down the road it's going to turn into the same conversations, but rather than us 3 turning into this whole God only knows like what.
Yeah, we're kind of at this place where it's either we're going to become an LLC or a nonprofit. You know, we're trying to make this more of a business. And so that's a long conversation that you have to get all 10 artists on board for. And we have, I mean, so we started off just with an Instagram page, and then we're like, let's show together. And then we started coming up with these goals. And one of our goals was to get in SECA and was to talk about this. And, you know,
Yeah, so now what? We did it.
yeah, we
We're
did
here.
it. And so, you know, and
Yeah.
now one of our goals, at least it's like my real big goal, is to give back. It's like we came together, we started showing together, and now it's like, dude, let's give back to this community that supported us so well. And one of them that I want to do is that this summer we're going to go to an invite artists residency at Red Lodge. And we're hoping to maybe come up with a plan there to develop a scholarship, try to get our group as a whole to give a scholarship every year to a residency. Another one that we have is, what's our?
We want to put together some jury
There we go.
shows. That's one thing that we've been trying to kind of figure out how to navigate that road. Again, we don't know what we're
No
doing.
idea.
Again, we're figuring that's.
No clue.
It's so funny to think
So
of like,
professional.
yeah,
guys.
yeah.
It's. I mean, it's
we
true.
look real cool.
But I mean, you figure it out. We're artists. You know, we kind of work through these things.
Yeah.
It might take some time, but I mean, I'm not a business person. If we become an LLC, like,
I'll
or a
probably handle a lot of
nonprofit,
that.
like, no way. There's no way I know how to do any of that. So, like, learning to navigate, like,
But that's the thing.
Which
Yeah,
is
this is
such
the
a
beauty
learning
of it,
experience,
right?
and you never know what you're doing when you go into these
Yeah.
things, but you just got to jump in.
And I also feel like you have to be really open about communicating, which we do really well, even though sometimes it feels like we're not doing it well enough. But we're always like, we're emailing back and forth, we're texting, like we're constantly communicating with each other. And that's huge. You know, that one of the
And
big
deadlines
things.
too, though.
Yeah,
you
I
know,
know.
setting deadlines, it's
Oh my
so
God.
important.
Yeah.
You know, and
It's
it,
like herding
it
cats.
sucks because it's like, you know, we're not making any money doing this,
Yeah.
and we're putting so much time into
Yeah.
it. But you got to do it
Yeah.
because to get it there. I mean, it's been, I mean, it's just such a learning experience, and it keeps going.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's all of those things. I never knew anything about an LLC.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that acronym stands for.
Limited liability company.
But you know, that's the thing. You just jumping in and doing it
Yeah.
and setting these goals and then achieving them.
And then, you know, once we get to those goals next year, it's going to be again, like we'll come to the drawing table and figure this out. And, you know, I am constantly following other groups like Objective Clay. They've done a great job of establishing like some really awesome avenues on how to connect and give back to the public. Carol Epp does a really great job with Musing About Mud. We've talked about doing a web page. We've talked about a book at some point where we show our process. We want to show you how to pack sculpture because like I didn't learn that in grad school. Still don't know how to do it that well. So we kind of have all these ideas, right? And it's just a matter of time and like, you know, us sticking to our guns on it. But overall, it's been like a great experience. And for me, one of the beauties about this is when we first started coming together, I was living out in kind of rural Alabama, and I had nobody to talk about clay, and I had like nothing going on, and I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing, because it's like grad school again. It's like that atmosphere where you're super excited, you're super jazzed, we're all passionate. And I feel like that's the most thing for me, is that I get to still stay connected to people that love clay as much as I do.
yeah, it's changed for me. So, like, I was in the residency when I started this, like, I was in it, I had that, like, base community. I just moved to rural Pennsylvania.
Yep.
I hang out with no
It's in
one
the
but a
boat.
cat. That's the most conversation I have. So having this outlet to meet once a week, it's like hanging out with friends. It's like,
Yeah.
for me now, it's the whole thing has changed for me. I like started out as this thing that I wanted to do to kind of promote figurative work, and now like me and Taylor in the beginning, she's like, this is like the greatest thing for me because I have no one to talk to.
But my dog.
But now I'm in that situation, and so it's like changed completely for me.
Yeah.
As to like, I still have the same goals of it, but it's like it's
It's
a whole different thing for me. Like living where you don't really have a big group of people to hang out with, like residencies offer. So now I have this wonderful group of people that are all amazing artists. They're all wonderful people, and we have like this network of great
Yeah.
friends, essentially. In the end of the day, it's like friends trying to do something, you know, which has been super wonderful.
Yeah. So I think we're going to wind down. And if you guys have any questions, ask us anything. We're totally open books. You can, I mean, at any point in time, you can ask us questions. You might not like the answer if it's like a tough one, you know, but we want to thank you so much for coming out and supporting us and letting us come up here and talk about our experience and get next door if you haven't seen what we've been able to put together. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good.
Does
Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
You mind just going back a little bit and just give a little more detail about your process of approaching the gallery?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So establishing a body of work that you think is going to be something that would be interested to galleries is the first step. And so if that takes you a year or two, like just hunker down and get that body of work, right? Because you can't go to a gallery and be like, oh, I'm in between like this and that, and I might change. They want to know that you're in for it to make the work that they can sell, right? So that was the first step for me. The second is this is my technique. I went to artists that I felt like were making work similar to mine, same concept, same narrative, kind of sometimes the same style, sometimes not. I would look at their CV, see where they have shown, and then I would go look at that gallery and see if my work would be suitable in it. So that gave me right there a list of places, right? Because I feel like that's the hard part, is like figuring out where you can sell work. So then I did that, and then I came up with a really nice cover letter being like, this person, and that's another thing, is it was nice to have some introduction too. So like Melissa Cadell showed at a gallery, and she's like, oh, you might be able to show at this gallery, you should approach him. And so in my letter, I was like, Melissa Cadell told me about your space. I researched it. It looks wonderful. Here's my CV. Here's my web page. You should have a web page. And here's some images. I'd love to try to show with you if you're interested. And then after that, you have to completely be okay with them not responding at all, writing you back being like not interested at all. Or, yeah, like this could work, maybe in a year or two, come back to me, or, yes. And so kind of like the grad school or residency thing that you did, like you had 14 people that you applied to for residencies. Same thing with galleries. Like apply to a lot if you want to get into some. Don't, and trust me, there's galleries in my mind that I want to be in, and that's like the long haul. Like if I get into them while I'm like at 50 or 60 or even 90, that's a goal of mine, right? So I kind of feel like it's baby steps. Like I'm in some galleries now, and I'm hoping that network helps me get into the better galleries and, X, Y, and Z. So kind of like it's all this churning thing where I have like a game plan and I just organize it and go for it. And yeah, sometimes I'm a little bummed with, them not calling me back or anything, but then I'm just like, well, it's a cosmic game of tennis. I put something out there, and if it gets hit back to me, I just hit it right back out. So that's how I do galleries.
Can I ask, in terms of, Kevin, you mentioned making work that is more for exhibition, not for sale. If you could speak to similarities and differences to your process,
Mm-hmm.
Travis, about going out there and approaching galleries, especially for work that might be perceived as difficult, like heavy installation.
Yeah, with my work, my like sculptural work, I feel like it's out there. I feel like
little
people
dudes
think my
on
work's pretty
pigs.
dark. I think it takes a unique individual to be into my work. I feel like that's a huge thing. I feel like most people want cute work. I would not describe my work as cute at all.
It's cute.
But I'm terrible at approaching galleries. I'm sure there's a space for me out there. But I haven't, I haven't really approached much like Taylor, which she inspires me to try to do that,
But you do a lot of juried shows.
Yeah,
So-
I show a lot
Right, he
as much
shows
as
a
I
ton.
can. Whatever comes the way, like I'm always searching for what shows are going on. And that's for a way for me to get my work out there. Is that going to work in long term? Is someone going to see my work in a show and be like, I want you in the space?
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't
The
know.
exposure.
What about, if you've done some solo shows though,
Yes.
So I was actually thinking more towards that direction of question, not permanent representation, but having a chance to put forth the body of work that you've been working towards for a while.
So solo shows are a great way to keep yourself motivated.
So find a
So-
space that you like and apply.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're gonna do.
I feel like that-
Every now and then somebody will come to you and be like, I want to give you a solo show. But for the most part, it's you going out there and playing.
It's the best thing
Yeah.
to keep you motivated.
Yeah.
I mean, if you set,
Like, that's how you got shows.
Yeah.
Or did they come to you
well,
and tell
like
you?
I just showed at Baltimore Clay Works through residencies. So
Yeah.
I had the solo show through that. And then anything else has just kind of happened, like meeting people or just approaching people and being like, I want to do this. Yeah, I think trying to find some way to keep yourself motivated in the studio is great. I mean, it's pretty easy to fall out, but if you're like, oh, I have to put together an entire show in a year. I mean, when I went to Baltimore Clay Works, it was like the most motivating thing ever. I remember walking in and seeing this space, which was enormous. I was like, I have 1 year to fill
Fill
this
it.
space, and me being me, I was like, I'm not showing anything. Like, I'm going to make all new work for this show. And it kept me so busy. And it was one of the greatest things, like experience-wise, as to kind of do that and run through. If you've never had the like stress of putting together a solo show, and especially in a big space, and having like, I need to get this done. I literally like lived in the studio and just kept making and making and making until I thought I had enough work, and I probably still didn't think I did in the end, but it all kind of came together.
Real quick.
Oh.
Just to that point, sorry. Well, I'll be fast. Just to that point too, I mean, something like making work for exhibition, you know, oftentimes something like a solo show or a multiple, you know, like a 2-person show or whatever, you're making work that's cohesive, right? So it's not like a one-off piece for this, how that work can interact as a group, you know, so the work as a group together, not just solo. And then also, in terms of work for exhibition, scale comes in. So then there is all of those other issues of how are you going to, like crating, you know, building crates, things like that. How do you design work so that it can be shipped, you know? My initial like experiences with all of that was, you know, first making like figures that were all one piece. Then you get to that point where it's like, oh, well, I have to make these feet detachable. Maybe an arm, you know, an arm that hangs out has to come off. Even things like cost of shipping, you know, would it be easier if I just made this piece in sections so that I could then fit it into these, you know, these boxes or whatever together. So that's a, you know, that's another aspect of that type of, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
approach.
budgeting for shows, if you have a show across the country and you make an entire body of work,
Get ready for that price tag.
some places will pay you to ship work. I feel like most maybe send it back to you,
yeah.
but an entire solo show of work, you really do have to kind of think about how you approach it and how you're going to deal with that aspect of it, because it's costly to send. I mean, one piece costs like $200 to send. If you're sending 30 pieces, like I can't afford to do that. So
Did you have a question? Yeah.
You're good.
So you were talking about having like 14 applications and then sending your work across the country. Like, where are you getting this funding? 'Cause to me, I'm like, in a very practical way, wow, that's either half my rent
Yeah.
or that's food out of my mouth.
Budget, baby.
Yeah.
Budget like you've never budgeted before. Like, I have a jar sometimes, like we're going to Montana for this invite artists, and I have to fly out there and rent a car and all that jazz. I have a jar that says Montana on it.
Do you
And
really?
yeah, I mean, whatever you need to do, right? This is my weird way of being like, this money is only for Montana. Like, I cannot touch it at all.
for me, what I do, if I make any money that's related to kind of my studio practice, whether it's selling work, whether it's teaching workshops, any of that stuff, I don't spend that money. I don't use that to live. I use my other income of whatever I'm doing at the time. And I kind of try to save it, and I try to use all of that money and put it towards my expenses of my studio practice. That way I don't have to worry about how am I going to pay for this. That being said, if I was teaching all the time, I wasn't saving all of the teaching money. But now that I have a job, like if I do a workshop or something, I tuck it into like my savings account and put that towards expenses. Like I had to buy a kiln. How do I afford to buy a kiln? I had work from doing workshops, and after a while it kind of piled up so I could finally afford to do that. I mean, it's expensive. It's hard to be an artist because of the
Yeah.
price of it, you know? Like, I feel like everyone here probably struggles with that. I still do, you know?
Yeah. Well, there's also options, funding options, like individual
That's
artist
true.
grants. I mean, most state arts councils have substantial pools of funding, and it just requires getting good at writing those types of things, and saying the right thing and writing a convincing proposal. And you can get small amounts to larger amounts depending on if it's a project, or there are grants that you can get for certain things like that. If you're having a solo show across the country or something, or even if it is, say it's in the city or state that you're in, but you need to rent a truck or something. I mean, you can budget those things into an application for grant funding, and oftentimes, acquire some funding that way so that you're not putting it all out of pocket.
And on that note, I feel like you should know a year out, usually if you're going to have a solo show. So like you got time. Like I've got shows planned for next year, and we've got a show for 2020. I mean, like things are usually a year out. And so that's another interesting conversation in itself, is you make this body of work and then it's not that year that it gets places. It's the following year. But yeah,
Yeah, most galleries and stuff, they're setting stuff up at least a
year
year,
in advance.
if not 2 years ahead, which gives you a lot of time to kind of think about how to figure
work
it
through
out.
it.
If they can absorb the cost of you sending stuff to them, grants are great.
They're tough though. That's like,
yeah.
writing a grant, you're going up against a pool of people who are writing grants for the same thing, so it's not necessarily a guarantee.
There's
So,
money out there.
There
You
is
just gotta
money
look
out
for
there,
it.
but I also feel like it's,
It's time.
It's
You
a
still
little
gotta
bit of
have your
both.
jar.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can have the jar, the Montana jar. So,
We'll go to the back, so you have-
What is your guys' experience with juried exhibitions? Like, is it worth it to apply to one that's costs money? Like, is that been beneficial for you, like through promoting your artwork and your name?
You've got to.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I feel like when I
Yes.
It's like the
started,
only way to start.
yeah, when I started doing it, I applied to all of them.
Yep.
Literally every single juried show that came up, I was throwing an application out there, even if, you're paying shipping both ways, but it's a way to get your work out. I'm getting to the point where I'm more selective about what I'm doing.
Yeah, but all of us did it.
Yeah.
All of us have put in
I
a
mean,
lot of
you
money and
gotta
a lot of
get-
time at the beginning to get your work out there, to get established, to get people like interested, and then things kind of like, I'm probably 50-50 now. Like I still apply for stuff, but then I also get asked, and at some point in your career, you just get asked, right? You're so good that people just come to you. And even them, I feel like I know people who are so good, they come to you, but they still put it out there. I mean, so it's always kind of like that. But yeah, you gotta pay. You just gotta do it.
And get real good at getting denied.
That's how we've all done it.
Yeah. I mean, your work's not doing anything sitting on your shelf.
Yeah.
You know?
You could be
And-
the most talented person on the face of the planet, but if you don't get it out there for people to see it, they don't know.
I mean, we do have Instagram, but there's nothing that beats seeing a piece in person. That's why we make it, to get it
Get
out
out there.
there. I think if you're an artist and you don't want to do that, I'm sure people do. They're like, I just make art for the sake of making art. But if you're trying to make a living at it, you have to get it somewhere, and how do you start? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
after you're in it for a while and you start to meet people
Things
and
happen, but-
you get invited to more things. It's hard to say if this like particular shows actually like were super beneficial. It's so hard after time because you've got so many like after a while, and you start to get invited to more things, especially if the like center that they had the show at and they like your work, they'll invite you to do another show with them. So it is beneficial.
Also, you're regional, right? Like wherever you live, you can infiltrate that market. But if you want to get stuff on the West Coast, like you got to do something about that, right? And so that's how I think artists that we all know, they start off regionally and they're doing really well, and then they put it out there so that everybody can see it. And then that's when you get to be national, and that's when you get to be internationals, like you start doing the ones abroad. So I feel like you have to do it. So, well,
Do
okay, one more question. Sorry.
I was going to ask if there's somewhere you look to find these juried exhibitions in particular, or is it your clients?
Yeah.
There's so many great locations. Art Access, go to their
Ceramic
table.
Monthly.
Yeah, they are follow them on Facebook, follow them on Instagram. They're always posting things. Ceramics Arts Daily. I mean, if you look in the back of Ceramics Monthly, they have lists of shows. They're everywhere.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's websites like, what is it, like artshow.com
Yeah.
lists all juried
Juried
arts.
arts.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of websites that, not just ceramics, you know, and they categorize them, you know,
Yeah.
sculpture,
Yeah,
ceramic.
absolutely.
Oh.
And apply to ones that are like meant for your work, right? Like I like that Travis applied to everything, but when I did that, I didn't get into a lot of stuff. So then when I started like reading like what it was about and the juror and like if that was gonna mesh with my work, that's when things were like I started getting more acceptance because I was like applying to a show that my work fit. So that's a part of it too.
be kind of cautious about what you apply to too. I've definitely done shows
Man, totally.
that I've regretted doing because they ship your piece back to you. That is why I'm way picky about what I apply to now. So you kind of do have to be a little weary about things. You never really know what you're getting into, I guess. But there's some places that are just, I wouldn't say they're technically like poorly run. Maybe they're understaffed. So when it comes to them shipping work back and you get it and you're like, my piece was terribly handled, you know? So you do kind of have to be aware about that and expect things. There's very few places where I pack a piece and I get it back and I'm like, yeah, they packed it as good as I did. Rarely does that actually happen, which is kind of terrifying and sad. But I've worked in a gallery too, so I kind of understand, you know, but so kind of be weary about it. If you ask people, I'm sure you know somebody that's been in a show and if like that place was great, I
Yeah.
feel like word of mouth, just ask. I mean, obviously the ceramics community is like the most open book, like ask people. People will tell you this is a great show, like this is one worth doing, you know, and kind of look who's applying for them like every year. It's usually have the like same show every year. If you start to see a lot of people that you look up to or like you're really into their work and they're applying to these shows, then you know, I think that's a great way to approach it rather than being like, oh, well, I don't know a single person in this show. Is it, you know, kind of be a little particular about it. So,
Yeah. Awesome. Ask us questions after if you have more too. We'll be next door.
yeah, we'll talk all
Yeah.
day.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.